Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. And today I'm here with Henry. And considering the date, we decided to take a look at a couple of disturbing cases that we call the Easter Sunday slayings, and also something called 6 Degrees of Separation from Mayhem, which when I get into the story, you're going to see what I mean. But anyway, I'm bringing Henry in to discuss this. Number one, because he's ex-law enforcement. Number two, he's from New York, New Jersey, and he sometimes has a different perspective of things from me. Okay, so I always think that it's great, okay, to bring a little bit of contrast, okay, to things, to discussions like this anyway, you know. I think that's fantastic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, the first story that we're going to talk about, okay, and I'm going to let you see some clips, and then, you know, we'll come back and discuss it. It's a very, very disturbing case, and it, as a matter of fact, it did occur on an Easter Sunday, okay, and it happened back in 1975. Let me go ahead and I'm going to let you guys start seeing some of these clips. I'm going to give you some background so you can understand about this case, which even now it's considered the Easter Sunday massacre, the Easter Sunday killing. But believe me, just because it happened on a significant holiday like Easter is really not what's disturbing about it, and you'll see what I mean. Okay, now as you can guess, this involves a family by the last name of Rupert, R-U-P-P-E-R-T. Now, first person I want to bring into this was a gentleman by the name of James Urban Rupert. He was born March 29th of 1934. Okay, and until very recently, he was responsible for the deadliest shooting inside a private residence in the history of the United States. Okay, now what happened was on Easter Sunday, March 30th of 1975, he murdered 11 people. But it wasn't just 11 people. It was 11 family members inside his mother's house located at 635 Minor Avenue in Hamilton, Ohio. Okay, like I said, this is usually referred to as the Easter Sunday massacre. Massacre, it's obvious that so many people. Now, he had just turned 41 years of age the day before, okay, and he lived with his mom, who her name was Charity. Now, just in case you might think that this is in a bad neighborhood, it's not. The house was in the middle of a middle-class neighborhood. Hamilton is about 30 miles north of Cincinnati, okay. And I'm going to go a little bit into the background because I think it lets you understand the psyche of how someone could get to the point of doing something like this. And by the way, where this occurred, this was not his childhood home. This was somewhere he had moved into later on with his mother. Okay, now just so you'll, and I think it's very telling, he was described by his neighbors as a loner, intelligent, and an ardent reader. Believe it or not, he had no police records. Okay, now, as you can tell by some of the slides I'm showing, as an adult, he was about 5'6", 135 pounds. Okay, again, described as a modest and helpful man, was unremarkable and quiet. And I'm sure that it's not the first time that you guys have heard some type of this description used for people that later on are discovered to have committed horrible crimes. Now, this is the thing now, like again, he looked normal, but now a close look at his background, his biography reveals that he actually led a life of frustration. When James was a young boy, they lived in a long barn-like structure where they didn't have indoor plumbing or running water, and his dad raised chickens in the back of the house. Now, at this time of his life, he begins to develop asthma as a consequence. I guess he had an allergy to the dust and feathers, okay, which left him sickly and limited a lot of his physical activities for the rest of his childhood. Okay, so this kind of put him at a disadvantage, you know, physically from other kids as far as engaging in extracurricular activities. Okay, he couldn't perform like other kids. He even walked hunched over from the illness He was so sickly that he was not even permitted to take gym at school or play sports with the neighborhood kids. And so even without the asthma, again, he was a frail kid, all right, and short. So again, which tells you a lot of social interaction that normally kids get when they're in school or they go outside to play with their friends, in the neighborhood. He didn't have any of that. Now, he was regarded as a sissy by the other kids in the neighborhood, and he was remembered as being shy, introverted, um, and that routinely he was being teased by other kids, and he had few, if any, friends. Now, up until his junior year in high school, all right, this is about what, 11th grade, he's pretty much a loner. Again, is not involved in any of the extracurricular activities. He doesn't attend the ball games. He doesn't go to the dances. He's never dating girls. All the typical stuff that teenagers do. Okay, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, he's not engaging with anybody. Okay, and in hindsight, it seems that these events of his childhood had a very lasting effect. And believe it or not, that it's discovered later on that by this time he's impotent. Okay, he was never able to have sexual relations with a woman except as they occurred in his very rich fantasy life. Okay, now his memory of his dad was that his dad was a very frustrated and unsuccessful man who displayed a violent temper and had little affection for his younger son. Okay, he also thought that his dad had no confidence in him, and recalling that his father was always warning him that he was not going to be capable of holding a job or supporting himself as an adult. All right, and believe it or not, these, it's right there. Looking at this, you could see right there that these are all the ingredients for, the recipe for disaster. Which is exactly what it turned out to be. Now, what's worse, I mean, it's like you talk about the stars all aligning against somebody. He has a brother who's everything he's not. His brother named Leonard is 5 feet 11 inches. Okay, um, he's he's an athlete. He does well in school. All right, and then, but what makes it worse is that his dad dies when he's 12 years old, and it forces him to assume adult responsibility from an early age. Um, and later on, this guy, James Rupert, tells the psychiatrist that after his father's death, his mother would beat him and taunt him and would tell his brother Leonard to do the same. Okay, now, he also says that his mother made it very clear that his presence was a mistake because she had always wanted a girl, not another boy. Uh, And this, I think, is very, very telling. When he's 16 years old, okay, things at home got so bad that he runs away and tries to commit suicide by hanging himself with a sheet. So he fails, comes back, okay, and he gets beaten for running away and attempting to commit suicide, okay. It almost makes you wonder if that family was beating him for having attempted it or having failed. But anyway, that thought of suicide stays in his mind for the years to come. Now, before you think that his mom was a really terrible woman, which she was, she knew the difference because she was totally different with his older brother. Okay, she showered all her love on her older son, uh, who, of course, you're living with somebody who's a constant reminder of how inadequate you are. Okay, Leonard was the male head of the household, um, making James feel like he was an outcast in his own family. Again, like I told you, Leonard played sports while James sat on the sidelines. James was very conscious of being 5 inches shorter than his brother. Okay, and even when he was in school, like in his math and science classes, the teachers are always comparing him with his older brothers whose grade in the same classes had been superior. So this guy is not getting a break from anybody. Now remember also, folks, this is the 60s, At that time, teachers, some teachers, there wasn't that much significance into what your teacher said. And I'm sure there were some that were probably a little bit sadistical, realizing that what they were doing was they were hurting this kid, but it was what it was. Now, Leonard goes on, graduates from night school with a degree in electrical engineering, whereas James flunks out of college after 2 years. Leonard goes on and becomes a successful engineer with General Electric, and James can never hold down a job. He goes from job to job. Leonard is happily married and has 8 kids. James never gets married. And not only that, James is dating a girl who becomes his fiance. She jilts him, okay? And then she, of course, through James, meets his older brother. That's who he ends up marrying. Okay, so, in other words, every time the family gets together, he's seeing his brother with probably the one or very little girl that he ever dated, and she marries him and has 8 of his kids. All right. So, in other words, by his own standards, James is thinking, I'm as much a failure as my brother Leonard is a success. Okay, and in his mind, okay, he starts thinking of his brother as a sadist and a torturer. Okay, he starts at some point, he starts thinking of his brother like his enemy. All right. Now, he says, you know, of course, he's telling this to a psychiatrist later on. He's saying that since early childhood, he remembers that his brother locks him in closet, ties him up with a rope, beats him with a hose, sits on his head until he screams out loud. And of course, his image only gets worse and worse as time goes by. And by the time that James is 30 years old, he's starting to see his brother Leonard as an executioner. Okay. And what's worse, that this guy, his brother, is a major figure in what he believes to be an emerging conspiracy against him. Now, by 1965, this guy's paranoia is really escalated. Okay. And then the Hamilton Police Department determined that he had made an obscene phone call to an employee at the local public library where he spent a lot of his free time. He ends up admitting that he made the call. Now, but in his mind, he's convinced that it's his mother and his brother who are attempting to discredit him by informing everyone of his transgression and reporting to the FBI that he was a communist and a homosexual. Okay, I hope you can all see that this guy's starting to leave reality behind. Now, he also believes that the FBI is tapping his telephone not only at home, but also in the restaurants and bars he happens to visit. So over the years, he feels like the FBI is intruding into his personal life constantly. In other words, that paranoia starts to grow and grow. Okay. He also implicates other people around him, like in a plot to sabotage his career, his social contacts, and his car. Okay. Even by the time he actually does these horrible things, he tells the psychiatrist that he knows he's being followed by the state highway patrol, the local sheriff's department, private detectives, and the local Hamilton police. Okay. Now, prior to this happening, okay, just so you'll understand, both his brother and his mom had lent him money, okay, and I guess, you know, he had invested it, but, well, I don't know if he invested it wisely or unwisely, but there was a stock market crash in 1973, 74, so guess what? All that money went south, okay, and from what I understand, he couldn't hold a job. So, guess what? At this point, you know, from his mom is telling him, all right, if you can't hold a job, then you got to leave the house. Okay, which is understandable.
Yeah.
And his brother and his mother are both saying, hey, guess what? We want our money back. That money we gave you, we want our money back. All right. So, Henry.
Yeah.
Do you see where, I mean, you feel sorry for him, okay?
You do and you don't, because it's like, you feel sorry for him because of a lot of the stuff that they did supposedly they did to him, but a lot of the stuff he might have actually built it up in his own imagination because he either was jealous of his brother, his life was not going with the way he wanted, so after a while he substituted it with his own little,
Well,
his own little fantasy island trip.
well, I'm thinking, you know what?
And then after a
His
while, his brother, and then over the years, his little fantasy trip started becoming more real than fantasy, and all the stuff that he was thinking in his head was becoming real, and now his brother became his enemy. So all that stuff that he was actually
well, and
thought it
this
was
is the
true.
thing. If you look at the circumstances surrounding his life, you got to feel bad for the kid. Okay, as a kid, his dad doesn't like him. Okay, but his dad, by the time he's 12 years old, is out of the picture. Okay, his mother tells him this. She's not a nice lady. But then I'm thinking, wait a minute. You know what? Maybe she was a horrible person for telling him this. Okay. Now remember, by the time that he tells us to the psychiatrist after he's being interviewed for the murder, but there's nobody there, that mother can't turn around and say, I never said that to him. You see what I'm saying? um Maybe she did, I'm not saying, but at some point you're thinking also, you know what, maybe they were not, maybe they were kind of fed up with him. But at some point, guess what, they lent him money.
But you gotta realize around that time it was really rough, financially wise and everything else all over the country, pretty much all over the world. There was so maybe she was actually trying to toughen him up so he could do something useful, and he was just and because of the fact that they were like, pardon my French, eating shit.
Well,
And they were trying to make him understand that if he didn't toughen up, he was going to actually
okay.
not make it.
And that's my point, because when he commits these murders, he's 41 years old. Okay, so at some point his brother and his mother lend him money to go put in the stock market. Okay, plus his mother lets him come and live with her. I don't have that much information on his background prior, but apparently he doesn't hold a job. And what's worse, that I think was the reason why his mother was turning the screws on him, was that he was going out every night to drink in bars.
So
So his mother is telling him, okay, well, guess what? If you want to keep on not working,
what it is that it also, if he's 40 years old, living at home, and she's helping him out, and then he doesn't have money to pay her, but he has money to drink, he's a man child. And then on top of that,
wow.
he's complaining and everything
Okay,
else.
now
But
this is what the problem comes in, and this is why I brought this up. I think that holds true. You know, if you're talking maybe somebody that, now it even mentions his older brother, he might have been a real SOB, but it says he put himself through night school to become an engineer. You know what I'm saying?
he might have been an asshole, but he was an asshole with a house, a family, and a job.
Exactly. Now, I think the problem comes in for, okay, where you see, okay, that perfect storm where, yes, this kid has all these bad breaks. Maybe he doesn't have the best parents. But when you start seeing somebody, okay, and his mother and his, that starts saying where everybody's conspiring against him, that the FBI is after him, that they're accusing him of being homosexual. Maybe his brother and his mother didn't know about it, he was impotent. But when these are hallmarks all of mental illness. And I know back in the 60s that carried a lot of stigma, and people
Maybe to a certain extent, but also Dave, look, even up to this day, now there's always guys like that. That back in New York, there were guys like that. Even in the 80s, the 90s, even now, they have their own little pity party, their own little. And it
okay,
worries
yeah,
me, and they don't want to take responsibility. It's the same
okay,
thing.
no, but see, and that's the thing that, when you look at this, they're saying that even though he really was very frustrated and almost disliked or hated his brother and his mother, the fact that he had never um, developed any outside social connections, like with girls, other guys, one other guy, what happens is that even though he being around them is hurtful, they are his only emotional connections. Okay, and like I said before, this guy, as far as I'm concerned, has all the earmarks of mental illness. Okay, because let me tell you something. You can have a son or a brother that's lazy and maybe he just wants a drink and you're like, you're after him. But when you have a family member who's telling you, the FBI is following me, they've got my phone book, the local police, you guys are after me, you're accusing me of being a communist and homosexual, which, by the way, people don't understand that back in the 60s, this was a big no-no. Remember, back in the 1960s, you told somebody, a man, that he was either a homosexual or a communist, it's like, that's accusing him like of being the worst of the worst. So to him, that tells you right there that what's going on in his head is like, okay, he's losing touch with reality. Okay, so what I'm saying is that, a lot of times nowadays when we hear about all these people doing shootings and now we've got social media where they do all this stuff on Facebook, but what's going on with him, it took a longer to develop because remember, this guy had no police record. Okay, was the equivalent of somebody going on Facebook or on other type of social media and starting to write all these disturbing things, which now people recognize, like, oh God, is this guy going to go crazy and do something? But my point is that, yeah, he might have had but that there was here something that makes you think, could they have avoided it? I think so, if they would have realized. But again, we're talking, it was a different time.
Back then, they ignored those type of things.
Well, and we're going to see he was good at one thing, though. And I'm going to, unfortunately, okay, you're going to see that it was the worst thing that he could have been good at, unfortunately. Okay, now, okay, so here we are. Okay, let's go back. It's Easter Sunday, March 30th, 1975. And by the way, his brother, whose nickname, his real name is Leonard, but his nickname was Pinky, okay, and his wife, Alma, they bring their 8 kids ranging in ages from 4 to 17 to see their grandmother at the house on Minor Avenue, okay? In other words, they all come over to have an Easter meal, and they have an Easter egg hunt on the front lawn of the house, okay? Now, Rupert, James Rupert, he's got what it's called a severe case of the holiday blues. I think it was a little bit more than severe, but anyway. Now, he spends the afternoon sleeping in the upstairs bedroom, okay, and at about 4 p.m., he wakes up, goes downstairs, and he chats with his brother about politics and the stock market, and he's looking at his nieces and nephews as they're, gathering the Easter eggs. So, they're out there playing. And unfortunately, it appears that this is the opportunity that he had been waiting for. Okay. Now, he spends a few minutes talking with his family, chit-chatting, and then he tells everybody he's going to go target shooting. Okay. Which, by the way, what happens when I said that he became really good at something, guess what? He was a weapons nut. He had a bunch of guns. And since he didn't have anybody, a lot of people would see that. They would see him out by the Miami River in that area shooting at cans. So guess what? He had a lot of weapons. And not only did he have a lot of weapons, he was really good at shooting. Think about it. Somebody like that, a weapon like this became like the equalizer. So anyway, talks to everybody, tells them, hey, I'm going to go target shooting, which was not unusual for him. He goes back upstairs, collects 3 revolvers, a .357 Magnum, a twin 22 caliber handgun, and an 18-shot rifle. Okay, and he comes back down to the first floor, where all his family's gathered at. Now he walks in through the kitchen, still in a state of like apparent calm. And his brother asks him with a mocking smile, how's your Volkswagen, Jimmy? And later on, I'm going to explain to you why also that might have triggered him, even though it looks like he already came with the intentions of killing. He props a shotgun against the refrigerator door, and now with his back to the kitchen sink, okay, He fires first at his brother, who falls backwards onto the floor. He then shoots his sister-in-law, Alma, and then his mom lunges at him like in a last effort to save her family and, of course, her life. And now, most of the kids were playing in the living room, but he kills first his nephew and his nieces. He kills his nephew David, then his nieces Teresa and Carol, that were in the kitchen, and then he goes to the living room where he kills his niece Anne and his 4 remaining nephews, Leonard III, Michael, Thomas, and John. Okay. Now, later on when the coroner arrives, he says that he theorizes that he shot some of the victims more than once just to make sure that nobody was going to escape. And this all happened within 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, he decimated his family. Now, he spends 3 hours in the house, and he finally calls the police, reports the shooting, and just waits inside the front door for authority to arrive. Which, by the way, in doing the research on this, Henry, you're not going to believe it. One of the things I came across is that they believe that he went and he took a nap. Because everybody asks themselves, why did he take so long to call police? That he took a nap on the couch, then when he took a shower, and he came back and he calls the police. All right? Now, of course, he's arrested and he's charged with 11 counts of aggravated homicide. He refuses to answer questions, is very uncooperative, and somehow or other he's making it very clear that he's going to try to plead insanity. Now the county.
If it was now, he would have got away with it.
Well, no, it depends.
Would insanity now?
It depends. Okay, you know what, Henry? In insanity, sometimes maybe he was insane up to a certain point, but I don't think he was insane not to know what he was doing. Now, the prosecutor, okay, John Holcomb, he comes to the crime scene, and he says later on that there was so much blood on the first floor, okay, it was dipping through the floorboards into the basement, okay, and that, as a matter of fact, to this day, there can still be blood seen on the wood, because he had fired a total of 35 rounds, and which means he made sure, like they said before, that nobody was going to survive, okay, and of course, all of the weapons were recovered at the scene, okay, which I think is really sad that the one thing that this guy excelled at was what he used to kill all his family.
Yeah, a lot of it was overkill.
Well,
wow.
You're going to see later on that his the defense and several psychiatrists that they bring in are trying to testify that he already had signs, indicators of mental illness.
Believe it or not, he had that serial killer mentality. Even if it wasn't his family, he would have eventually ended up doing it to somebody else. You don't just come across like that.
You have to understand, this guy did not have a police record. Okay, and that's the thing. A lot of serial killers, when you look at their early lives, yeah, a lot of them have all these, not all the times, but a lot of times they have these traumatic, family dysfunction and all this. But what happens is that's what you see a lot of, that they start killing animals. They start doing all these disturbing things before they get to the point of killing somebody. And this guy, I'm not saying he had no police record. Except that he made an obscene phone call to the library. Wow. The flip side of that is that he had no police record. All that means is that if he ever did something wrong, he was never caught. Okay. But we can only go by what we got. All right. So you're going to see that the defense, of course, is trying to say, hey, he was insane, And the prosecution is going to try to say that he did this for money reasons. And you ask yourself, how's that work? Well, they said that if he would be declared insane, guilty, but in the sense insane, or not guilty, but he would have been sent to a hospital, he would have inherited everything that belonged to his brother and his mother. That between the life insurance, this and that, it was about $300,000. Which back in 1975, $300,000 was quite a bit of money.
Yeah, like today's rates, almost like $1.5 million. Well,
something like that. And how that would have worked out is that if he would have been declared insane, maybe they would have sent him to an institution later on down the road. Um, they say he's okay, he can leave. And if that would have been the circumstances, he would have gotten the money. If he is found guilty, then he would have gotten nothing. But he was banking, which again, and you know, and I've talked about this before. Where does insanity start and end, and where does evil start? Okay, because before he kills his family, this guy, you know, that persecution complex, that's very telling. That's very telling that there's something going on
sometimes
here.
that's one and the same. Insanity and
Well, no, because there's
one,
people that have mental illnesses, Henry, and they function. They take their meds and they function. They're okay. And they don't kill anybody. Okay, but when you have somebody who unfortunately has got this background, his only emotional ties are two people that mistreat him emotionally, even though, again, you wonder how much of that is really accurate. They were both dead. No, they can't turn around and say, hey, but still. Or maybe they were really frustrated by the time he's 40 years old. Maybe they're not being so kind to him anymore because they're kind of fed up with him. Who knows? But anyway.
a lot of times they fictionalize a lot of the stuff in their own mind.
That's the thing.
And they create their own little victim
You know what?
world.
Neither his brother or his mom were around to say, hey, you know what? That's not the way it happened. But anyway, they go ahead and, you know, the defense is saying, no, he's really crazy. Like he didn't know what he was doing. And the prosecution is saying, no, he did this, premeditated this. And you're going to see why, all in the hopes of doing something so crazy that, of course, they're going to say you're insane. And down the line, he was going to stand to inherit about $300,000 in properties and all this other stuff. Okay, now, in the research, just so you'll understand, this family was very well regarded. That not only the family, him, that when this came out, people were saying, no, it can't be, no, that's not, that because this guy's so quiet, he's so unremarkable, which, by the way, Henry, how many times, you know, do you hear this about people that they discover later on, you know, got 10 bodies buried in the backyard, as an example, and then you ask the neighbors and they're like, oh, he was such a nice guy, he was so quiet. It's like,
look at all the serial killers of now, and even some years back, Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy was an amazing carpenter and contractor.
well, no, that's what I'm saying, that they have this persona.
Yeah. And they're very charismatic. Look at Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy had 180 IQ, and
no, I don't think it was that high. But anyway, no, he was. And that's one of the hallmarks that you're going to see, as a matter of fact, of psychopaths. Okay, they learn how to imitate emotion. They know how to fake it. In other words, and they're very charismatic. They got the gift of. Even though I don't think this guy was a psychopath, I really don't. I don't think that was the case. Okay, but you're going to see. But anyway, nobody can believe that this guy has done this. Okay, nobody can believe this guy has done this, and it gets so bad. Okay, that there, in that town, there is another family. Okay, by the last name of Rupert. Okay, by the time that finally sinks into the neighborhood that this guy killed 11 people, 11 which were his family members, everybody starts getting like a mob mentality, like this angry feeling. And this poor guy named James Rupert, who, by the way, was no relation to them, okay, he starts walking around town and he starts seeing people getting hostile and almost getting dangerous, okay? And some of them even felt like they were lucky to have escaped with their lives. He was the only one that remained in the telephone directory. Okay, because remember, this is back in the 1975 where people actually listed themselves in the phone directory. And he wasn't even related. He says that the guy's Donald Rupert. Okay, he says that his family was constantly harassed by the townspeople for at least 6 months following the slayings. He finally had to change his name for a period of time in order to avoid the dirty looks and obscene phone calls. And he said that even people that had known him very well weren't really sure that he was not implicated in the crime. Okay, and he says that even at work they thought that he had done it, and they wanted to know when he was going to get the money. Okay. And he's, you know, in other words, they were thinking that somehow or other he was some distant family member, and that all this money and property was going to come to him. Okay. And he said it. He hated it every time. But anyway, the aftermath of this whole thing is that what everybody was asking themselves is, what were the factors that led to him killing his entire family? Okay. Now, obviously, the most important one may have been his frustration, that he just couldn't, he kept failing over and over again, you know, and even since childhood. Now, they're saying guns played an important role in his life. They represented a manly activity that had been denied him as a sickly child with asthma. Plus, you know, he never got to do sports, which, you know, a lot of boys express their masculinity. Now, he got so much that the police chief described him as a gun freak, okay? And that, again, he collected guns and he passed his leisure time on the banks of the Great Miami River, walking tin cans along the ground with his pistols, which, of course, made him a very good marksman.
That's funny and ironic, because if he was that well with guns and everything else, and everybody knew him, it's weird that he didn't try to get into the sheriff's department or anything there.
But you know what? Remember, this guy, you know, he, by that time, like everything, just the same way they knew stuff about him, guess what? He's probably by then had a reputation as a guy that spent all his time drinking and couldn't hold down a job. So who knows? Now, and remember, you go into the police department, you need to have some type of physical stamina to go into the academy. Sounds like he couldn't have cut that either. So now, it says here that as recently as 2 days before he kills his family, okay, people see him repeatedly firing his .357 Magnum at cans, okay, and that a guy that works at the gun store says that about a month or two before he kills his family, he asks him how he can obtain a gun silencer. Hello. You know, that to me is like a big red flag. Okay, the implication is clear enough, okay, which is that apparently he had been planning for some time to eliminate the members of his family. Now, the exact time of death seems to, he hadn't decided. You know, when were the, you know, the emotions, the right time, and unfortunately when that gathering that they were all there. Because remember, and I think that this is where the prosecution was going with that idea. If he kills his mother and his brother, which were the ones that he had supposedly a beef against, who gets everything?
Yeah.
The Alma, his sister-in-law, or the kids, or whatever. So, okay, now they're saying is that he had a frustrating childhood, and the fact that he had access to guns, that there were also other things that were triggering him. Okay, but they say that a lot of people, despite what they think that a trigger is just something instantaneous, those triggering events can occur over a period of weeks or even months before they actually commit a murder. Or they can do it right immediately prior. But sometimes people think of a trigger as in, oh, it just happened and he runs off and gets a gun. But believe it or not, that's not the case.
A lot of times the trigger is
where they see where it's going to...
It's weird because they're actually manufacturing that trigger. They are edging themselves on. And in other words, they're talking themselves into it. So every time they get flashbacks, they can remember, oh, my brother did this to me, so I got to do that to him. My mother beat me. So they're edging themselves on. So that trigger is becoming more real as time goes on, to a point that if it was any time that he was going to talk himself out of it, that's over.
Well, now, what they were saying is that, you know, what they look at, the experts say that in a number of family mass murders, now remember, this is family mass murders, okay, they say that the killer has given up trying to find a job and is deeply depressed about it. And in other cases, you know, for example, a husband kills all the members of his family when his wife is going to either get a divorce or right after a separation. But that whole thing also, the job, not getting a job, that seems to be a denominator in these people that kill all their family members. Now, and psychiatrist says that the family killers, again, this is very important, family killers are frequently seen as gentle and passive individuals. Okay, in other words, they carefully sublimate their hostility towards family members so long as they receive some kind of reward in return, be it psychological or economic, which he's getting them. Because remember,
Yeah, but they feel betrayal. They say, look, I was so good and everything else, and look at the way they treated me. So they feel betrayal.
well, no, well, he's getting it. Like, that's what I'm saying. That even though he didn't have the best relationship with his brother, his mother, his mom is letting him live there. Okay, but anyway, now when such rewards are withdrawn, like for example, that they're going to get kicked out of the house, or they cut off the money. Okay, there is an explosion of anger that is likely to occur. Okay, another thing that they say is that a lot of these family killers are frequently loners. Again, which they almost exclusively rely on their family or certain family members to satisfy their emotional needs. So the threat of separation by their family members can be very painful and threatening to them. So this thing where his mom is telling him, I'm going to kick you out, and his brother's probably telling him, hey, that's it. Not only is it going to deprive him of money and a place to live, even though his relationships with both of them is horrible. Let's face it, he didn't have relationships.
To him, even though to anybody else, the fact that his mother was letting him stay there, it seems like a big deal. But to him, he felt he deserved it. He felt they should have done. They didn't have no other way that they were supposed to do that. Even though he was 40 years old, they felt that they were supposed to do that. So anything else to him is a betrayal.
You know
But
what?
that staying in the house, like he felt that he deserved that.
Well, maybe by then they're thinking, okay, he's just turned 41 years old. If he hasn't gotten, like in other words, maybe they're thinking, okay, we gotta like either if that rough love or the tough love kind of deal. But anyway, now in his case, all right, what they were saying is that there's a mechanism of certain precipitating events just prior to that Easter Sunday, which magnify the intensity of his negative feelings and to separate him further psychologically from the people in his family. Because everybody thinks, okay, how can you do this to your entire family? Again, he didn't get along with his brother. He really thought bad of his brother and his mother. But it's like all of a sudden he telescopes, and the bad feelings he has towards them go out of proportion to the point where he separates from them. And in other words, he doesn't see them anymore as my mother and my brother, who I hate, but they're my mother and my brother, and this is the rest of my family. Okay, now when this goes to court, okay, there's a waitress. Her name is Wanda Bishop, and she testifies that she's a 28-year-old mother of 5 who was separated from her husband, and she frequently would meet James where she worked at, which was called the 19th Hole Cocktail Lounge. Okay, and he kind of talked a little bit to her, and when she's testifying in court, okay, she tells about a meeting that she has with him at the bar on the evening before the shooting. Okay, and he's telling her about all his problems, his financial troubles. He can't keep a job, and the problems he's having is with his family. Okay, and he tells her he has a problem in quotation marks, which has to be taken care of immediately, and that his mother told him that if he could drink 7 days a week, he could help pay rent. Otherwise, he would have to leave home. Which you have to understand. To most people, they can understand it. They might not like it, but they understand it. To him, this was like, okay. Now, this Mrs. Bishop says that he leaves the bar at 11 p.m. and returns back, and she asks him if he had taken care of his problem. And he tells her, no, not yet. Okay, and then he stays at the bar till 2:30 a.m. when it closes. All right. And they say this is one of the things that, even though he really disliked them, he had very hostile feelings, he depended heavily on his family for both emotional and economic support. Um, and that reunion that they would all have was really special to him, okay, because the fact that he was facing eviction, and that, I guess everybody is saying, hey, you know what, we have had enough, you know, of your excuses. Okay. Now, And again, we come back to what we talk about, which is, in most cases, you would say, hey, you know what? You got a 41-year-old brother or son who is going out drinking every day. It's like, that's it. You know, you've got to, like, you know, cut the cord and get him out the door and, you know, go live in your car because apparently. But I think the problem here, Henry, is that whether innocently or consciously, his family failed to recognize what was really going on with this guy.
I think a lot of things, especially in the 60s and 70s, people did not. They were kind of like had a blind eye. See now in this time, now at 2017, um, we are more aware of the things around us, and we could see things in a different view. You could see somebody down the street. You could say, well, you know what? I think this guy's a drug addict. Or I see this. You're more open to seeing things in a different way. At that time, people were had a blind eye to certain things, and they were not, even though they could have it in front of them. Either they wanted not to see it, or they just said, you know what? F it. I'm not gonna. I got too much on my plate. I'm not gonna deal with it.
You know what? And I think also, and sometimes we tend to forget this because remember, when he was growing up, he was the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s by the time. Back then, mental illness had a very big stigma attached to it. Okay. Um, and, you know, a lot of times, and that sometimes I have to remind myself of that. Back then, unless you were doing something that was really totally erratic, like talking to the air, or people
That
they
was a
weren't quick to
taboo.
it.
That was a taboo. People did not want to know about it. Like, for example, um, it's going a little bit of a bunny trail, but it's significant. Kids back then, if they were in school and they were like a type of special need, nobody wanted to know about it because of the fact that if they acknowledged it,
You're right. You're
if
absolutely
they
right.
acknowledged it, that means that other people will know about it, and it will put a bad stigma in their family. They will look bad in front of their friends and everything else. So they did not.
No, there
Did
was.
not
You're
want
right. You're
anything.
right.
They did not.
You're
They
right.
wanted anything to get out. So
You're
in
right.
fact, if they
You're
ignored it,
absolutely right.
it never
You know
happened.
what? You're absolutely right. Back then in schools, they had no process for either identifying a kid with special needs or psychological problems, much less class. It was like I said, unless it was something really, really, really severe,
And
okay,
then
and their family was like forced to like, okay, we got to do something
and
about
then
it,
they will put you in an institution.
and right, and institutionalize you because, of course, not only, but you know, you know, nobody wanted to see you because then you would be the brother or your son, the crazy
No,
guy.
because then they institutionalize you. That means that their friends won't know, and they will look bad in front of their friends, and you just disappear into the abyss.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Um, now what happens with, like I said, of course, his defense team, they call in a barrage of psychiatrists. Okay, uh, and like one of the evidence that they portray, which believe it or not, I think this is accurate because remember, this is coming a long time, years before he killed his family. Was he's telling that he thinks that his brother has been trying for several months to sabotage his Volkswagen. Okay, and he was convinced that his brother Leonard had gotten into the crankcase, had purposely destroyed the carburetor and the distributor, had sabotaged the windshield wipers, had loosened the bumper, and blown holes in the muffler. Okay, so you remember at the beginning when we were describing that when his brother apparently asked him such an innocent question about how's his Volkswagen, they're saying that this precipitated this entire surge of memories and fantasies about what his brother had done to him since childhood. Okay, and that's what they were saying, that that was one of the triggers that, like, aggravated by everything else.
That to me is funny and hilarious because just making a comment, like a comment about a Volkswagen. A Volkswagen is like
Right, but remember,
it's like a paperweight with wheels.
okay, but remember, this is your a person's perception is their reality. You have to understand that he was thinking these things for years. That's why I'm saying that there was some type of mental illness, absolutely, because when you're thinking that your brother is doing even sabotaging your windshield wipers, okay, now again, this is what they were saying,
You
that
gotta realize
from his point of view,
it's a Volkswagen. You
no,
you don't need any help.
no, whatever, no. It's like, whether he would have been driving, whatever. The problem was not the car. It was that he suspected, okay, that there was that persecution thing going on. Now, they're saying that from his point of view, okay, when his brother asks him about the car, he says that was a trick. Because remember, he had already come down with the guns, and that he reflexively drew his gun, and to him, he was going to make sure that Leonard never hurt him again. Okay, and that he was going to get the better of his brother, somebody who he had never measured up to, uh, and that he was going to, deprive Leonard of his life, the lives of those he loved, and that he had enough money to live the life that he was rightfully his. Okay, now, one of the doctors involved described that he was suffering from a paranoid psychotic state. That, in other words, that when you were in the state, you had like a departure from reality of thinking and behaving. And that people like that, they're inclined to be excessively suspicious, jealous, and angry. Okay.
Oh yeah.
And that he was, again, that he was so obsessed with this belief about his family members, the police, the FBI, that, remember, he's thinking this is a long-standing conspiracy to persecute him.
One of the biggest things
Okay.
that I believe that it is that he was jealous of his brother because his brother was having the life that he thought that he was supposed to have.
Well, but they're saying here, even to a lesser degree, he suspected everybody. The police, like, in other words, there was nobody that he looked at in a kindly light. Now, they even had a psychiatrist from Harvard testify there. And he kind of was saying that maybe his reaction was uncontrollable because he was just so overwhelmed by his rage that he had been suppressing and accumulating over years, actually since he was a child, that, in other words, that there was no way he could have avoided doing this. And he even said, look, if there would have been more people in that house, he would have killed them also. It wouldn't have mattered that even if you weren't a family member.
No,
okay.
Once they black out, anything in front of them is fair game.
Okay, now, and they were saying that when he started killing people, he was like a robot. And especially because he killed his sister-in-law and the kids, which he really didn't have a problem with them. All right. But at that point, he was like,
Yeah.
he was basically, once he got to them, he was like a deliberate execution type of thing.
It's not kind of relevant to this, but it's a thing that they say back home in New York. It's business, not personal. That you black out. It's like it's a shooting across the board. He's not seeing them as people. He's just shooting uncontrollably.
Well, as a matter of fact, they were saying, and again, that thing, he thought that the FBI was, together with his mom and his brother, to say he was homosexual. Now, whether he was homosexual or not, that's got to be a problem for a guy who's impotent. So again, there's that whole sexual thing going on. But anyway, a reporter that went there described in the following. This reporter that finally, when they allowed them access to the house, says, I remember going to the house the first day of the trial that summer when reporters were allowed to go inside. The house had been closed up since the initial investigation, and it was stifling inside with the smell of dried blood, and there were many bullet holes visible in the walls and floors. There was a coin laying on the linoleum floor, a quarter splattered with dried blood. A skillet full of what looked like hamburger helper was still sitting on the stove in the kitchen. Okay, so in other words, they locked up the house, okay, and it did not open it, till later on. Now, the way they tried him was that they, believe it or not, this went through 3 type of trials. Okay, the first one, they held it in Hamilton, Ohio, which is the city where it occurred at, and it was a 3-judge panel. Okay, now they found him guilty on 11 counts of murder and sentenced him to life in prison. However, there was a mistrial declared, and they decided to retry him in another city in Findlay, which is 125 miles north, because they were saying that there's no way he was going to get a fair trial in Hamilton. Now, the second trial begins in 1975, and the prosecutors provide evidence involving the witnesses who had seen him doing the target practice and asking about the gun silencers and the gun collections, and admitting that his mother's expectations were a problem they needed to solve. So you know, there was a lot of other stuff that was brought into the second trial. And in July of 1975, he gets 11 consecutive life sentences. Now, fast forward to 1982, 72 years later, he gets a new trial, all right? Again, because they're pursuing the fact that he's really insane, okay? And they're trying to bring in more psychiatrists from all over the country. Again, back 1982, another 3-judge panel, okay, they find him guilty of just 2 counts of first-degree murder, his mother and his brother, but did not find him guilty on the other 9 counts of murder by reason of insanity. So he received 1 life sentence for each count to be served consecutively. In other words, instead of having 11 life sentences, he got 2. In other words, because killing the other family members, but I don't think he was going to get out.
I don't
Okay.
know. I don't know. To me, it's like this is just like a different thing altogether. It's like I think like 11 life sentences. That's kind of redundant. It's like
Well, I guess
it's
you
kind
know,
of funny.
it depends also on, you know, because there's certain laws in different states that sometimes, you know, they do they have the ability to come up on for parole depending on the sentencing. But anyway, now check this out. Because capital punishment was suspended in the United States from 1972 to 1976 as a result of a Supreme Court decision, and since this occurred in 75, he did not receive the death penalty for any of the crimes. And he remains incarcerated in Allen Oakwood Correctional Institution. Uh, and in 1995, he went before the state parole board, and he was 61. But of course, his release was denied. You see what I'm saying? That even though you get, you know, you can still go up. Now he doesn't. He didn't get another hearing until April of 2015, and again he was denied. All right. Um, so again, you know, I think that Mr. Rupert is gonna, you know, spend the rest of his days um, in incarcerated. Okay. But now we're gonna get to the good part, Henry, which is the ghost reveal. Okay. Because, you know, you never know. I really don't know what is the background of that house. You know, it's a small house. It's supposedly 2 bedrooms upstairs, you know, the rest of the house, and then the basement. Okay. And we don't know the history, but, you know, I think that just because of what happened, okay, this is enough to, like, in other words, there's enough here to possibly have something going on, even though some of the people that live there have denied it. Now, all 11 victims were buried in Arlington Memorial Gardens, okay? And a year later, the house was open to the public and all of its contents were auctioned off, okay? It was then cleaned, recarpeted, and rented to a family new to the area, whose members were unaware of the murders that had taken place, okay?
Wow.
That new family left the house claiming that they were hearing voices and other unexplained noises. Okay, now, apparently in Ohio, okay, if a house is the scene of a homicide, the state categorizes this information as psychological stigma. Okay, meaning that a real estate agent doesn't need to tell you about it, okay, because they consider a psychological stigma not a material fact, and therefore it doesn't need to be disclosed unless you ask about it. Okay.
But you can't ask about it. You don't know.
Well, that's exactly what happens if you're new to the area. You know, maybe, you know. So anyway, I was doing some research, and I found on one where this person, this is what he wrote, that he he's saying that he, as a kid, and he says when I was 9 or 10, that they lived there in that house, okay, and that they were the first family to live there right after the murders, okay. And he said, like I said, that it was a 2-story with the 2 bedrooms, so he had to share a room with his 2 sisters. And at one time they're all asleep, okay, and he says that his mom says that she sees the hall light come on and sees a shadow in the hall. Now, she wakes up, grabs the door handle, and the lights go off. She checks on the kids, are all asleep. Okay? So he says that after that, he moves to the basement. He says where you can still see the blood stains on the floor beams. And he says that one time he's downstairs with his stepdad, and that his mom and his sisters, they're out doing laundry when someone opens, in other words, they hear someone open the front door, walk into the kitchen, and go upstairs. Okay? His stepdad grabs one of his guns and goes to check it out, but there's nobody there. So he says that right after that, they move out and they never come back. All right? Another description, I don't know if this is from the same person, okay, because remember, this happened back in 75, is that, again, and apparently, believe it or not, the area that seems to have some type of something going on is the upstairs hallway, okay? He hears footsteps coming down the hall, which he assumes are his mother. Okay, now he sees a shadow stop before the door, which he can see under the door. You know, when you see the light being blocked out by somebody. So all of a sudden, he says after a bit, the lights go off in the hallway. So he goes in and checks to see his mother. You know, why did my mom stand in front of my door and not come in? So he opens the door and finds nobody in the hallway, and his mother's asleep, and nobody else was in the house. So again, he can't explain who that shadow was. Another description of a prior resident was a woman. She again hears a sound in the hallway. This again the upstairs hallway where the rooms are. She goes outside of her room expecting to see one of her kids and finds a man standing in front of the open door of her son's bedroom, and this man is staring into the open doorway. Now, she described him as looking colorless, haggard, and that he had bags under his eyes. Now, she thinks that because of the dim lighting in the hallway, she thinks he's real. So she screams, and then the guy disappears. And when she looks in the room, she sees that her son is awake, and he has this total look of terror. In other words, that this kid had seen the same thing she had. So apparently, for some reason, that second bedroom seems to be a focal point. And of course, there's other stories tied into the stained floorboards and the sound of kids. Also, that if you're upstairs, you can hear kids playing downstairs.
Yeah, residual energy.
Possibly, yes. Now, in 2008, they had a lady who bought it, and she said she learned the truth about it just right before she did the closing. Okay, and that there was another owner who was there for 19 years, and he says that he says he never had a problem, and he said though that he lost some sales because neighbors would tell the new potential buyers what had happened, and people would back out of it. So he says that he lost a few $1,000s of good sales because, you know. Now, one of the last things, Henry, okay, which I think is a really interesting, is here we're talking Easter Sunday, all right, which means this is again a middle-class neighborhood. People are gathered together, Easter egg hunts, family gatherings. Now this guy goes in there and unloads over 30 rounds into his entire family, and nobody hears it. Because remember, the police arrive after 4 p.m., after 3 hours have gone by, where he calls the police and tells them, hey, you know, whatever, and the police arrive. Now,
let me tell you.
And the reason why I bring this up is that,
look, that's a small town.
Okay, again.
If a cockroach walks, everybody will know.
Well, no,
in
no.
New York, in New York, you drop a rock in a window, everybody opens their door.
Okay, but no, but see, this is the thing. You know, you think 1 shot, 2 shots, maybe people firecrackers, dismiss it. I mean, whatever. But you're talking, well, this guy went in there and killed 11 family members, and they're saying over 30 rounds went off with different types of shotgun. He even had a shotgun. Okay, this is the part I don't understand. And by the way, we're talking a neighborhood where, like, you got houses. It's not like, oh, this is a farm, and then you got to go way out there to find another house.
Let me tell you, I have guns, and
okay,
and when you shoot a gun, even a small gun, it's loud.
But now I'm going to bring up the paranormal slant on this. Now, a lot of people are familiar with the Amityville Horror and the DeFeo murders which is where Ronnie DeFeo goes in and does something very similar to this. Kills his entire family, his parents, his brothers, his sisters. Okay. One of the mysteries of that whole entire case was that nobody heard none of the shooting that went on. Okay. Which happened in the still of the night, in a neighborhood just like this one, in a residential neighborhood, in the middle of the night. Okay. Where people are like, you're saying, okay, one shot. Oh, okay, maybe. Nobody hears it, okay? Nobody hears it. Same thing. This is not the middle of the night, but this is a Sunday afternoon in a residential area. This is not like the middle of the day where people are out working, nobody's home. People are gathered in their homes. It's a holiday. Nobody here. And you know that there is a theory that when there is some type of malevolent overcast over something like this, okay, and I know this has nothing to do with the case as far as when you look at it from the theories that were presented in court, and of course they're never going to bring this up, especially back in 1974, even though this was around the same time that Ronnie DeFeo did his thing, okay, that loss of that nobody hears it, it's people say that happens, okay, that in other words that there's like a vacuum that's created, okay, where noises, especially gunshots that normally would be heard, okay, are not.
What happens with that is if you shoot one,
Right,
yeah, but when you start, and it's especially in a closed room,
right,
when you shoot more than like repeated rounds like that, it creates like a like an echo chamber. So after a while, you will not hear anything, but neither will the people outside because everything is confined to a room, sort of like a fire. When the oxygen is in the room and you open the door or a
right,
window, everything just goes boom, and it just explodes. Same
right,
thing. It's similar anyway. Similar.
okay, and like I said, the reason why I say this is that, you know, Ronnie DeFeo had killed his family only a few months before. He killed his family in November of 1974, and this happened in March of 1975. Okay? And again, this was one of the things that, when that whole case was developing, that they kept trying to understand why nobody had heard this whole family getting slaughtered in their bedrooms. But then you have something very similar happen where twice as many people got killed. And remember, a lot of them he shot more than once. He shot them twice just to make sure that they were. So I'm telling you, there's something there that I
Yeah,
know that.
he was crazy. He was nuts because okay, it's a gun related thing. When you shoot a gun, believe it or not, even something as small as simple as a 22, and people don't understand this. When you shoot a gun with a small caliber like that, a 22 will kill you faster and more precise than a 38 or a 45. Because if you get shot in the shoulder, that 22, that bullet will travel all the way to your heart and kill you like that. And so it's like to shoot that people, somebody like 38 bullets, it's like that's like
Well, no,
overkill. The guy's nuts.
well, no. Well, that's what they were saying, that he made sure like that nobody stayed alive. But okay, and this is why I'm bringing this up. Okay, is as a comparison to the DeFeo murders. Okay, you could look at them strictly from cause and effect, or what was brought to court, or what can be proven or disproven, which is of course why they bring in a psychiatrist and all this. But again, among paranormal investigators, there's always this belief, and by the way, again, this is not excusing or taking responsibility away from the people that do these horrible crimes, but that there's a malevolent force that does the tipping point. You know what I'm saying? That extra push,
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that all these horrible things which have been building up, which by the way, this was the same thing that happened with Ronnie DeFeo, where he had this very dysfunctional, uh, you know, relationship with his family, especially his dad and everything. That he ended up killing his brothers and sisters, which he really didn't have anything against him. Just like this guy killed his nephews and nieces. Like that, there's a malevolent force which tips or pushes so that all of a sudden this person, okay, who's not well in the head, you know, Ronnie DeFels, he was, you know, allegedly taking a lot of different drugs, and this guy sounds like he was already, you know, he was delusional, or you know, maybe he had persecution complex, but that tipping point that takes not only to kill, but to kill their own family, you know, people that in a way they love, but that there is this malevolence, which is what precipitates it. That little, you know, when something need, you know, that little push, when, you know, when something's like teetering, and all you need is that little.
Mm-hmm. I was in that neighborhood quite a few times back in New York, and I knew a few people that knew him. He was crazy. He was not exactly wrapped too tight.
Well, but yeah.
And let me tell you, that was like a time bomb waiting to happen, because that guy was more,
but
like they used to say, like kids used to say back then, he was more on than off. So it was
well,
unfortunate, but it's bound to happen.
You know, and you know, I beg to differ, because I think, yeah, sometimes some things are inevitable. Sometimes you look at them in hindsight and you see, how can not anybody have seen what was going to happen? But sometimes, and what I'm saying is, yes, maybe sometimes it would result in the killing. Or let's say where they only kill the people that they really hate, but they don't decimate their entire family, where they decimate children, where it's like that. That's what I'm saying, that this is total, like I think that darkness that is like,
a lot of it
that takes over.
No, see, a lot of it has to do with taking away. So I don't know, you get it, like, okay, for example, you have this ring.
Right.
You enjoy this ring.
Right.
You love this ring.
Yes.
If I take it away from you, I'm going to take something you like.
Yes.
If he kills those people, he's taking away everything that was valuable to them, everything that meant something to them. So he's actually destroying their legacy. He's destroying anything and everything that meant something in that family, because he felt something was taken away from him. So he wants to make sure that any lineage, anything that was left, is over. So if he's done with him, everything that's left behind, there's not going to be anybody left behind.
Okay, which is like a scorched earth mentality. And that's a very good point. That maybe part of it was saying, well, you know what, if I go down for this, but nobody here is, you know, gonna, you know, I believe it. You know, there's people like that. Like if I'm this unhappy, and if I'm so hard, you know, everybody's gonna join me in the pit.
You know that also Misery Loves Company?
Well, no, yeah, that's a little bit of overkill on that.
If he's miserable and stuff sucks for him, he's not gonna let anybody stay alive to enjoy anything. That's where it is.
No, yeah, you're right. You know what? That's a good angle of looking at it. You're absolutely right. Because you know what? A lot of people find it hard that you could feel like that about your family members. But yes, but
believe it or not, that's more common than you think.
No, okay, well, all right. Now, let me ask you something. What would you say, Henry? What do you think are the odds? Okay.
What?
That on this same street, now I'm talking the same town, obviously the same town, but on the same street, they would have another horrible murder, very disturbing murder. What do you think the odds are of that?
Believe it or not, a lot more than you think.
Why? Why do you say that?
Because sometimes things are like that. Sometimes it's not. It is. Things happen like that. Sometimes it's a lot more. It's a lot more. You know, fantasy is a lot more real than you think. Sometimes that happens. People, things. You know what? Even small towns, they have that Rockwell look. People have this misconception
Okay.
They think that things like that don't happen in those towns. They have this delusion. They have
Yeah,
that
you're right.
Rockwell mentality. They think that it doesn't happen. Believe it or not, sometimes it happens more in those towns than in the city, because people don't think of looking in those towns, because they think there are like that Rockwell
Well, you know
mentality with
what?
the little farms, the little general stores and things like that. That you see like the kids still
Right.
delivering the milk in the jars.
Okay. No, and I know because I know you look at it from, you're part of town, but I understand that, a lot of people think that, little towns or smaller towns and things like this don't happen. But I'm telling you, there was, there might have been. I'm not.
I'll give you an example, and you see what I mean. It's a town. The town is about maybe 200 over 200 years old. It's called Englishtown, um, back in Jersey, and they have farms there with 200-year-old barns, and people in the wintertime ride that sled like in that movie Pleasantville
Yeah.
with and they found, and believe me, it looks exactly with the general stores and everything, because I used to go over there and I have friends there, and they found 3 people hung off a tree.
Okay.
Okay.
Because that. But anyway, no. But wait. Okay. But I'm not talking about a town, and I'm talking about a street, and you guys are gonna see what I mean. Okay, because this in and of itself, okay, I'm telling you, is pretty disturbing. Okay, pretty disturbing. I don't know now, but there's something pretty dark that was hanging out there. Okay, now check this out. Now, the same year that this murder is committed, okay, a child is born, and her name is Tina Mott. Now, poor Tina appears to have been born under cross stars. She was originally from New York, and she ends up in the foster child system. Okay, and when she's 16 years old, she's emancipated, and
How?
by the time she's 16, in other words,
Oh, okay.
she's emancipated, not at 18, but by the time she's 16. Now, 20 years later, after the Rupert murders, okay, she lives in Ohio, just down the street from the murder house. The Rupert murders happened at 635 Minor Avenue, and in 1996, she lives in an upstairs duplex with her boyfriend, Timothy Bradford, at 622 Minor Avenue. Okay, we're talking right down the street. Okay, now, supposedly, the reports are that, they're a young couple and they argue frequently. And, when I was researching, see, some of the online blogs suggested there might have been drug use, especially by him. Now, all of this, they have an 18-month-old son. Okay. Now, she has no family in Ohio. Okay. So all of a sudden, she disappears. All right. And her boyfriend is telling people that she's gone to visit her family in Buffalo, New York, and that she left her son behind. Okay. Now, his mother, Elizabeth Bradford, at the beginning, he's telling her the same story. But believe it or not, this lady is the one that files a missing persons report, okay, on June 11th, 1996, okay? And she tells, when she files a report, that the last time she saw her was June 4th. Now, the neighbors that were interviewed later say that right after this happens, he moves in with his parents. Right after she just supposedly goes to visit her family, he moves in with her parents, which that's kind of unusual, especially if you're expecting that she's going to come back and while she's doing this visiting. Now, the mystery of her, remember, this girl doesn't really have any family per se to be looking out for her. So this starts to unravel because all of a sudden there's a lake there called Linden Lake, and 2 boys are out fishing, and they snag what they think is a fish, which turns out to be a human skull. All right, now this skull is missing the lower jaw, and there's empty sockets where the teeth should have been. All right. Now, of course, the police, they turn it over for forensic examination, and they find that, when they take measurements, that it looked like it was a young female. But what they find is more disturbing is that it had been defleshed. All right. They could tell by the nicks on the skull that somebody had defleshed it. So to them, this is an indicator that there's foul play that's been involved. Now the police, they start looking at the list of missing persons in the area, and of course, Tina Mott's name comes up. But at the same time, they have no way of, in other words, they have to first prove the identity of this skull in order to say, who does this belong to? All right. Because at one point they were even thinking, well, did somebody dump it from a cemetery? I mean, but of course that defleshing part is a little bit disturbing. Now, as a matter of fact, law enforcement, they send divers in the lake. They're trying to find any additional bones. They cannot find anything. All right. Now, at this point, the forensic anthropologists, they're able to extract DNA from the thickest part of the skull. All right. Which they were very lucky, because apparently, since for the time that it had been in the water, it had destroyed some of the DNA evidence. And they take that DNA and they compare it to her son through the mitochondrial match, which is what happens between mother and child. And absolutely, they verified this is Tina Mott's skull. All right. So of course they immediately focus in on her living boyfriend, Timothy Bradford. Okay, and they kind of like show him the forensic evidence, and he confesses to killing and dismembering Mott. Now, of course, once they know what direction to go. They search the duplex where they had lived, and with the luminol, they find evidence of blood on the carpets and also in the bathroom. And they search a storage unit that he was renting. Now, inside they find a set of knives, which later proved to have been the ones he used on Tina, a book on how to kill somebody with your hands, and, Henry, I think it's very, a little publicized fact that they found a notebook with satanic writings, an indicator that he practiced satanic rituals. Okay?
Wait a minute. Just the fact that there was a book out there that shows you how to kill people, that's kind of effed up.
Well, but,
That's
maybe under other circumstances.
That's just wrong on every freaking.
Well, no, I guess it's maybe some people, somebody could say, hey, it was self-defense, but when your girlfriend disappears and her skull turns up in the lake, you're in trouble.
No, but the fact that you have a book like that, goddamn.
Well, when they ask his mother, Elizabeth, she tells the police that she fears her son and his bad temper. Now, when they interview him, that supposedly he kind of confesses, he says that it was an accident. That he tells police that him and Tina are arguing and that she charges at him, and that his instinct, like to defend himself, is that the reason why he uses the weapon to lash out at her. In other words, I guess he was holding the knife because somewhere in the line he kind of admits that he slit her throat. So, oops, I'm defending myself, but I slit your throat in the process. Yeah. All right. Then, but still, and his version of it is that he's afraid of spending the rest of his life in prison, so he uses 19 different knives, a meat cleaver, and a hacksaw to methodically skin.
And he was defending himself.
Well, no. Well, yeah, according to him, but then what he's saying is that the reason.
I mean, come on, really? What did he think he was? Buffalo Bill?
Well, okay, yeah, unfortunately, yeah. That's a bad comparison, but yeah,
very accurate comparison.
Well, no, that's exactly. He's saying that after this accidental whatever, that he does, and then he leaves and he comes back and supposedly he finds her dead in the bathtub. He's scared that he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison, so that's when he uses 19 different knives, a meat cleaver, and a hacksaw to skin, behead, and cut her body into pieces small enough to fit into garbage bags. Now, some of the pieces, like the internal organs and the skin, he flushes down the toilet. Okay. Now, then he needs to take her head, her severed head, cradle it in his lap, where he uses a pair of needle-nose pliers to extract her teeth, because he's already thinking that they could use the DNA found there to identify the skull. Okay. Which was really interesting, because when the anthropologists were looking at the skull, when they were trying to determine, sure enough, that anthropologist kind of guessed that it was a plier, but believe it or not, there was some wisdom teeth that she still had under her gum linings that he didn't see and he didn't take out. Okay, but now what he does is he took the heavy garbage bags and he goes to there's a sewage treatment plant and he hides the remains of the property in the surrounding facility, on the grounds of that facility. Now, when he's confessing, he agrees to confess and to lead the investigators to her remains if, and there's a big if they agree to charge him with something other than murder, okay? Which, if he would have been charged and convicted of that, he would spend the rest of his life in prison. Now, the authorities they were trying to give her proper burial because remember she has no close family members, so the prosecutors agreed to go along with his terms. Okay, so basically he pleads guilty to voluntary manslaughter, abuse of a corpse, felony theft, and misuse of a credit card because, among other things, I had found that he had used her credit card after her death to make purchases. You could tell he was really worried. He was really sorry he had done that. In the end, he ends up getting sentenced to 12 to 25 years for his crimes. Now, that duplex at 622 Minor Avenue has been made into a regular home.
But that's kind of messed up.
It's no longer duplex.
But that's kind of messed up. You're getting 12 to 25 for a horrific murder like that. That's
right.
As
a matter of fact, his 25 years are up, I think, in like 2023. He's been denied parole, but yeah.
No, but I mean, that's not much.
Well, but that's the deal they made, and that's how it went down. Now here we come again. Which is, you know, I mean, I understand where sometimes people don't want to get involved, and they lived in a duplex upstairs. So basically, not only did they have neighbors on either side, they had neighbors downstairs. Okay. And you know what? Maybe, like they said, maybe they were arguing a lot. So maybe their neighbors were like used to it. But believe it or not, when this goes on that he kills her, the police never get called.
I mean, it's like,
now,
I mean, that's kind of like really puzzling. It's okay. Somebody stabbing you, go ah.
Well,
or don't stab me, you
no,
mother.
Okay,
ah!
but okay, well, but you know, without having the exact transcripts, because in the research, you know, you go, I don't know exactly what the wording or how that went down, or if he maybe caught it by surprise. For all we know, he goes like this, slits her throat, and there goes the you know. But again, you know, it makes you wonder: were these downstairs neighbors so used to hearing them viciously fight, that it was like, oh, it's another fight?
No, but,
okay.
But also, with so much blood, cutting somebody up like that, so much blood, it had to go through the floor.
Well, no, they were saying no. As a matter of fact, I was looking at the research, was that he put her in a tub, and basically that's where he did all his work. So, you know, again, you know, that's another part, you know, and I know sometimes you know, without actually being there, you really don't know, how did this take place? How did this work out?
Look, if he's that methodical, that methodical in a bathtub, he probably did that before.
You know, I knew you were going to say that. But that's, you know what, they were young. This was not like a hard guy.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If you look on so there's at least almost like a book about like that thick that they have on kids killing people. Okay, so let me tell you, that doesn't surprise me.
You know what? You know, and I understand. I mean, that can happen for a variety of reasons. It can. Okay, but now I'm going to loop back, because of course this is horrible and very disturbing regardless. I mean, not only did he kill her, how he just, you know, and I know there's people that sometimes accidents do happen, that why didn't he call the police if it was truly an accident? But the way he did it, it was like, you know, I mean, not only did you kill somebody, the mother of your child, you basically take her apart, and you know, you're even going through the trouble of pulling out her teeth and her molars. So I
would have said accident, and I would have bought it as an accident. If they're arguing, and maybe he's making a sandwich or he's cutting something, and they get into an argument, he goes, okay, then you freak out, you call the cops, you take your medicine. But when you start doing a Buffalo Bill and you start cutting everybody up like that, that's not.
No, I think that,
okay, right there, the core is out on that one.
Okay, I think a lot of human beings have a problem with that part. And as a matter of fact, the police were saying that if it wasn't for the fact that those two boys had fished out the skull, she would have just.
He would have got away with it.
He would have got away with it. Now, because again, I'm going to put the malevolence in this. remember, this is not really much publicized in any of the things that are out there. But the fact that this guy had a notebook with satanic rituals, okay, and
Yeah,
satanic, it makes you wonder.
I know where you're going with this.
How am I going with this? I'm
Okay,
not.
he cut her off for ritual.
Well, maybe, possibly, maybe at the beginning that wasn't his intention, but once he got there, maybe that's why he decided to. I mean, unless we're inside his head, we really don't know.
It would have been her or the baby.
You know what? It makes you wonder, but, or, you know, because like I said, most people ask themselves, not only are you killing somebody, but then you're taking their body apart and you're 19 different knives, a meat cleaver, and then you sit with this person's head in your lap with a plier to pull out all their teeth. Now remember, this is a person, yeah, you fought with, but lived with you as a mother of your child. There's got to be something missing inside of you for you to be able to do this. I just, and
It's one of two things. Either he got together with her with the whole intention of doing that, and he impregnated her with the whole intention of doing that, and either using her and the baby or her, and then he freaked out about the baby.
well, no, well, they were saying that apparently the way they met was that she was going door to door selling magazines. That's how they met, and then they moved in together. And she worked like at a little thrift shop, and he had like another little job somewhere else. And you know, and again, she had no family. You know, and think about it, even his own, and the fact that his own mother was scared of him, that speaks volumes also.
And you know another thing too. I guarantee you, he probably might have not done it if he thought she had family. Because then he would have said the family would have came after him. But
No.
the fact that she probably told him that he didn't have she doesn't have family, he figured nobody will miss her like a homeless. So
But I don't know, there's something there. I know that we don't have all the exact things, but his mother was involved, and luckily that lady, she, you know, she did the right thing. She put a missing persons report on her. That's another thing. If his mom would never have put a missing persons report, you know, um, how would they have known to? Because that's one of the first things they did was, let's look at the people that are missing, okay? And if there's no person, they're not going to go and try to uh, get a mitochondrial DNA match from what? If there is no missing person report from this lady, absolutely did the right thing. But again, there's this overcast of malevolence.
if she is afraid of him, your own mother's afraid of you. That's like about a million red flags right there.
Well, okay, but again, I'm going to put that in all these things. You know, you know, there's always been murders. People do horrible things to each other. But again, when you start looking at, especially a murder, and sometimes it wouldn't be the first time people get in an argument, couples get in an argument, somebody comes out dead. When you see this whole, the way this all worked out, and the fact that this guy, whether he really truly was a Satanist or was just reading up on it, but that there was some malevolent influence, again, I'm telling you, that one and this one, there's just something there that's like, mm-mm. But, okay, now we're going to get to the part of what they call the 6 degrees of separation, okay? You're going to ask yourself, you know that there's a theory out there that all it takes, that we're all connected by 6 degrees of separation, okay? Like that, in other words, you are very connected one way to, or the other to somebody, like within six people. You know, everybody's connected on the earth, one to the other. Now, let's go to what's in a name, okay? Now, this last gentleman's name was Timothy Bradford, all right? Okay, now, remember this name, Timothy Bradford. Now, what happens is that in that same town, all right, in that same county, in other words, back on March 24th of 1984, there's an 11-year-old girl named Carrie Hintermeister, okay? And now, this little girl disappears while playing with her friends. Now, what happens is, the way it worked is on March 24th, here she's playing with her friends, and that, you know, that she would love to play school, okay, and she's playing again in this quiet suburban neighborhood, okay, with her friends, and she's playing the part of a teacher. Now, amongst the other little girls that she's playing with, there's a man there whose name is Bradford Gill. Okay, now he's 27 years old, and his daughter is one of the playmates, and he's playing the part of a principal. Okay, now by the way, he is a Sunday school teacher, and he's the father of 4 young children. Okay, and all these little girls who are playing, he pretends to be the principal. Okay, now Carrie, while she's playing, says she needs a chalkboard, and she tells her friends that she's playing with it. She's going to go to the principal's office to get one. Okay, remember, the problem is this little girl never comes back. So when she doesn't come back, you know, everybody starts looking for her. Okay, now guess who's leading the search? One of the most trusted members of the community, Bradford Gill. Okay, now about a day and a half goes by, all right, and then somebody, I guess, you know, which was a little bit, had their thinking cap on, they check out his garage and they find her body stuffed underneath a white workbench. Okay, she had been stabbed twice, once in the heart and once in the stomach. Her throat had been slit and she was covered in blood. Okay, now smears taken from her body revealed the presence of sperm, and of course he was arrested and charged with her murder. Now, the prosecutors felt that he lured her to the garage to rape her and then killed her when she resisted. Now, check this out, Henry. His version of it is that when she comes to the garage, she's laughing and joking with him, and for some unknown reason, she grabs a penknife. Okay? Now he's saying that they were playing around and wrestling, and then again, for some unknown reason, when he grabs her from behind, he kind of feels her body go lifeless, and he's kind of insinuating that somehow or other this little girl accidentally stabs herself. Okay, so he puts her on the floor, and he's saying he can hear the air escaping, and he can't, you know, from her, and he can't find a pulse. Okay, so for some unknown reason, he stabs her again and slits her throat. Okay, and he stated that I felt sorrow and fear. I don't know why, but I felt anger too. A young life was gone. I then inflicted the other wounds on her. So, but, okay, wait, let me finish it.
Okay, wait a minute. So he brought her back to life by trying to rape her?
I don't know. That's God. That's now again. He can't explain why he's stabbing her a second time or slits her throat, and again he can't answer why there's sperm found in her body, and why he participates in his search for her when he knew perfectly well where her body was, that it was in his garage. Okay. Now, according to Gill and a clinical psychologist hired by the defense, no surprise there, he's described as having a form of traumatic amnesia after the murder and can't remember anything. Man, that's pretty convenient. Now, when this happens, everybody's thinking this guy's going to get the electric chair for killing and sexually assaulting this little girl. All right. Now, remember, prior to this happening, this guy is portraying himself as a model citizen who likes to help others. Now, this is the part I don't get. This is truly the part I don't get. Okay, what he does is, in order, he doesn't want to go to trial by jury. Okay, so what he does is he goes before a 3-judge panel, and somehow or other he finds people, I don't know who, to tell the judges about his saintly behavior, and he's always helping people in need. Okay, and this 3-judge panel believe it, and they give him the lightest possible sentence, which was life with parole, eligible in 20 years. Okay, and that they claim that what he did was an impulsive and spontaneous act. Okay, like there was a momentary aberration. and that before that he was always a model citizen. I'm very, let me tell you something, being a model citizen sometimes that's like,
Okay, you know what?
it's like, wow.
You know what? I like that's like wrong on every level, disgusting and everything else. Let me tell you. Um, I mean, this is kind of like messed up, but I mean, what he's
Okay, but well, this is what they're saying. That this is the part that I don't understand, because you can see where maybe this guy, he's trying to defend himself. Maybe he's a psychopath, which, and of course his defense attorney. But they're saying that one of the judges cites that Gil has personality disorders, and while he knew right from wrong, he lacked the ability to obey the law. Okay, now it doesn't explain how nobody noticed his supposed mental problems for the 27 years of his life, which I have
so
no idea what they are,
so
but okay.
raping a minor. So what his thing was his thing in his perm was trying to give her life.
Well, no.
Or
The thing is this, Henry, because and to me, there's a problem here, because how can this, how, where in your mind do you not fail to recognize that if a little girl goes with you to go get a chalkboard and she doesn't come back, nobody's gonna be like, it's like probably some type of compulsivity problem amongst other things. So anyway, believe it or not, he is not convicted of sexually assaulting her. Okay. And in 1997, the prosecutor goes back to court because he wants him adjudicated a sexual predator. Because this guy's saying if this guy is able to get parole, at least when he goes back out to the community, he's going to be known as a sexual predator. Now, they present the coroner's report, which clearly indicated the presence of sperm in Carrie's body. And a judge, John Moser, which was one of the judges on the 3-judge panel, ruled that Gil was not to be a sexual predator. Okay, now in 2007, the prosecutor's office made a second attempt. Okay, and his own daughter, this guy's own daughter, came forward, which of course she's a full-grown adult by then, comes back and says that Gil had molested her as a child. Okay, and once again the court refused to label Gil a sexual predator. Okay, which means that if he's ever released, the community where he resides will receive no notification to let them know what he did and what this guy's proclivities. This is the part I just don't get. That I am at a, okay, I just don't get it. But anyway, that's my, here we're going, that 6 degrees of separation. We go from a guy that lived on Minor Avenue to Timothy Bradford, who lived on Minor Avenue, who killed his girlfriend and dismembered her. And then we go to Bradford, a guy by the name of Bradford Gill, who in that same town in 84, in that same county, I believe, in Ohio, kills and rapes a little girl. And then, what they say, what's in a name? Well, what is it? A rose by any other name smells just as sweet. Okay, this is that last example of 6 degrees of separation. But in this case, it's 6 degrees of separation between mayhem. Again, another gentleman by the same name of Bradford Gill, believe it or not, is a little bit more recent. In November of 2014, however, this was out of Alabama, Marshall County, Alabama. Okay. This gentleman, okay, is going to be spending 30 years behind bar for repeatedly raping a young girl starting when she was 12 years old. Okay. And he pled guilty to, he was charged with rape, sodomy, and incest, but then he basically, I think he was convicted just of the rape and sodomy charges. And that this girl was basically being abused for like 3 years between the time she was 12 to 15 years of age, which is when they were caught by his wife. And this poor girl told the court that he made her feel like she was his wife instead of being a child. Okay, now he was sentenced to consecutive terms of 20 and 10 years for the rape and sodomy charges. And that sometimes he was abusing her like almost every day. All right. And of course, this girl, no surprise, she's had emotional breakdowns. And believe it or not, this girl, even though she's in jail, she says she lives in fear that he's going to try to kill her and her family. And she's in counseling, or she was in counseling, because this happened back in November of 2014. And she's always going to be in counseling. And she has nightmares. And believe it or not, even though he's got a long sentence, she still is fearful that of the day that he's going to get out of jail. Okay. And what's really funny is that before he was sentenced, he apologized and asked for mercy on the court from the court. Okay, which makes you wonder, like, okay, was there any mercy in his heart for? I was going to tell you, I don't think he needs mercy from the court. Who he's going to need mercy for are the prisoners in there.
Let me tell you. I went when I was back home. I went because I had friends that were in the New York Police Department and stuff, and I went a couple of times to hang out with them, and I went when for rape charges and things like that. Let me tell you, guys in prison or a-holes in prison will look the other way. You go rape a woman, sodomize 20 times a day for the rest of their life. But you touch a kid, you're done. Yeah, I mean, your life is over as you know it. When you get in there, you can forget it. Yeah, if you live to a week, it's too much.
I hate to say it, I hope he does live. I hope he does live, because people like that.
Because they're gonna pass him around and beat and do the same thing to him, and they're gonna kill him, because a lot of those prisoners may be garbage and everything else, but one thing that's taboo to them is kids.
Well, and I'm going to say, because in these prisons, Henry, you're going to have people that probably have done the same as him and worse. But you also do, like you said, you got a set of prisoners, okay, who they might have done horrible things, but they got kids. And like you said, for them, it's like, if I'm an adult, and they might have been horrible things that they did, but like you said, for them, the fact that he was doing this to a kid, okay, that he was charged with incest, and
kids are sacred, and because I heard that all the times that they always said, and to prisoners, kids are sacred.
Well, you know what? Because a lot of them understand that they know what it's like to have their own children. They thinking always that, what if somebody did this to one of my kids? You know what I'm saying? Or, it's almost like that even if they've done horrible things, that there's always this cutoff point where they're saying, hey man, when you're doing this to a child, you've got to really, and I think, I hate to say it, but I'm sure that even in their minds, it's kind of gives them a legitimate reason to get that guy, because it's almost like this honor thing, like, yeah, we might be
or it sort of legitimizes the amount of garbage that they have done. So, because you know what?
Well, this guy's lower than us, so
I don't do stuff to kids, so it minimizes what I did.
Oh yeah, yes, it does, and it's like, yeah, okay, but anyway, guys, I don't know, but I think this was super interesting. And like I said, I asked Henry to join me in here because, like I said, he has a different perspective on things, especially on disturbing cases like this. And, and the reason why I also asked Henry is that, he came and he lived and he witnessed bad things that happened, but usually they were like in really bad, rough part of towns like that you kind of expected.
Yeah,
this is what you were going to see, you know what I'm saying?
See, back home, there's areas like what they have here in Florida. They have pork and beans and stuff like that. It's like, and people think Harlem, but Harlem not. They have places over there that cops are even afraid to go in.
Right.
But those are understandable. But when you talk about a small, I mean, okay, you know what? Okay, you know what? Former French, like, shit happens. You expect it to happen. But when you're like in a small town,
Exactly, and
You
that's my point.
that's what I was saying earlier. That's kind of funny because you expect like that movie, that Pleasantville thing of everybody in a small town to
No,
get along, blah 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 blah.
well, you know what, you know, like this thing that sometimes people think that, well, the worst thing that you get is maybe people cheating on each other, you know, minor stuff. But here is a perfect example that even amongst in an area where people, middle class neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods, where like everybody, like they were saying, you know, doing research, you know, there's a lot of people out there posting that lived in this area and have very fond memories of this area. This was not like a rough neighborhood where, you know, you've got people selling drugs on the corner and robberies. This was supposedly safe areas. And again, you know what? You just never know what goes on behind closed doors. But my other point is that sometimes, you know, and of course, I have absolutely no proof of it. I do always see, okay, where there's always that possibility of a spiritual interference, okay, that is the tipping point that takes us to what I consider what could be the most horrible thing, which is one human being killing another. Okay, and also the 6 degrees of separation. Did you see what happened? You had two people on the same street, then they shared the same name, and for God's sakes, okay, if your last name is Gill, do not name your kid Bradford. Okay.
Yeah.
Because anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have a good weekend. It's a weekend here for us. All right, and it was great to bring this to you guys. And please, I hope you like the show. I hope you subscribe to my channel. Hit the like button for the show. And you're going to see me on my regular show every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube. Okay, when I bring in some other shows of some very interesting guests, which I've got a lot of great people. As a matter of fact, um, I've got a super interesting interview with a Satanist. I've got an interview with a Satanist coming up, a long-time practitioner coming up, so that we can get the wide perspective on this. And you know, I have a lot of interesting people coming up. So don't forget, Friday 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Stories of the Supernatural on YouTube. Guys, have a great weekend. Take care. See ya. Bye.